Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Scrutiny Performance Panel for Service Improvement, Regeneration and Finance. Because this is the first meeting of the municipal year, we're required to agree a convener. So Councillor Holly has agreed to remain in the role this year. So could I ask members of the panel to indicate they're happy for Councillor Holly to continue? Okay, great, thank you. I'll hand over to Councillor Holly.
Thank you very much, colleagues. The next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I currently have two councillors, Mike White and Susan Jones. Do anybody know of any more? No? Okay, thank you very much. Next item is the disclosure of personal and prejudicial interest. Does any member? No? Any officers? No? Okay, thank you very much. Next item is the item that's always on scrutiny, and that's the prohibition of votes and declarations of party whips. Okay, then the next item is the minutes of the previous meeting. I shall go through them page by page. Page 1. Page 2. On the planning annual performance report, we will be having some further information with regards to the monitoring fee, but that probably won't be in the near future. The Spring Forward workforce report was updated and will be updated further. Then we came on to page 3, which was the annual review. And then the final update was the exclusion of the public for pre-decision scrutiny on the Financial Procedure Rule 7 for Palace Theatre. Can everybody agree that that is a true and accurate record? Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is minutes of the, is the public questions.
Public questions.
And we have no public questions. Then we have the role of the panel, which is for information. You'll see the first page and the second page. Going on to the third page, page 6, and then page 7. Minutes, and that's the role of the committee, of the panel. Are there any questions about those roles? No? Right, okay, thank you very much. Then the first item on the agenda proper is item 8, which is the report on the Audit Wales Report Sustainable Development, making best use of brownfield sites. We have apologies from Councillor David Hopkin, who is the political lead for this, but we have Matthew Bushett from Audit Wales. Sorry. To do the presentation of the report from Welsh Audit, and then Tom Evans, who's the placemaking strategic planning manager for the council. Over to you, Matthew.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much, and good morning, members. Bore da. So this was a national report we produced, so looking across all Welsh councils, and we were looking at how Welsh councils are supporting and encouraging repurposing and regeneration of vacant properties and brownfield or previously developed sites into homes or for other uses. So I guess the rationale for this was the continual need for housing being one, and actually this was seen as quite a traditionally complex area and one that's quite sort of difficult to overcome. So it seemed quite timely for us to look at this through the lens of repurposing that land and empty buildings as well. So we looked at two slightly different things there. And our overall finding was that despite notable amounts of brownfield developments being delivered, regeneration could be increased significantly with a more systematic, interventionist and collaborative approach. So by drawing on successful approaches elsewhere and more focused planning, councils could be better equipped to overcome these significant barriers that stop that regeneration. Just in particular and briefly, we just found that councils have a broad but not a comprehensive understanding of the built environment and the potential for regeneration. We found while some regeneration is being delivered, the focus is still on that easier to achieve projects, and councils are not always taking an ambitious interventionist approach to tackle long-standing barriers. We found that councils are able to name those barriers, to identify them, but are not utilising all the learning from elsewhere to overcome them. And we also found that when measuring this, we found it's challenging to measure progress delivering brownfield regeneration due to weaknesses in data and management. And that's the picture across all councils generally. So appreciate that won't be exactly the same in every individual council, but that was the general picture. So we made recommendations to both councils and to Welsh Government. So the 3 recommendations for councils were around making more use of the existing data that you have available to develop a more composite and complete picture of sites, and they're able to name the barriers to overcome them. The second was to increase opportunities for community-based involvement in regeneration, so both in plan making and actual development. And thirdly, councils should review current regeneration approaches and, where appropriate, set clearer, more ambitious regeneration policies and targets. And I think that's all I wish to cover for now. I can answer any questions shortly, but I think I'll be handed over to an officer who I think has got an organisational response. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Matthew. Can I hand over to Tom Evans? Tom?
Yes, absolutely. There's a hand raised there, but shall I wait for that to come in afterwards?
So, Will Thomas, Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a question for Matthew. When you say obviously getting more councils to intervene in regenerating brownfield sites, does that require sort of changes to laws or anything? Because it's very frustrating, obviously, going past brownfield sites, especially some properties with boarded up windows. There's some in my ward on the main road that's been boarded up for years. It's very frustrating. But on the other side, if you're the property owner and you don't want to sell it, who are we to force them to sell it? So it's a very conflicting one. I'm just wondering what and how those things are changed or managed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
I mean, yeah, this was one. Sorry, Chair. Yeah, this was one for us. I mean, we acknowledge it is a complex area, and we understand those reasons for not taking on some of these complex, often difficult to access sites. And obviously some of that will be in your power, some won't be. So I think we do acknowledge that in the report. And we've also put some questions, some recommendations for Welsh Government there, just to review where it is with the legislation on those sites. Whilst we can't recommend legislation is kind of changed. Our role really is just to reflect back how that current legislation is working in practice. So that perhaps is something for Welsh Government to look at. Unfortunately, that's kind of going beyond our role. I think where we've really focused on is what is actually available to councils and where within the current framework that things could actually change. I think a key one of that, as I said, is that kind of using what you've already got and using the data. And whilst we acknowledge there are significant hurdles to overcome, I think from this report it's still evident to us that there are some sites that could be turned around, but actually not to say it's easy, but actually there's a big kind of collaborative effort there to actually work with the local community, get the local buy-in as well. So completely understand how difficult this is, but I think we've tried to just focus on changing what you can with what's available to you currently.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think there's a difference between dealing with empty homes and dealing with brownfield sites, which is what the report is focusing on. But I was interested in the reference to making recommendations to councils, because it seems to me, and looking at our council's response to this report, we're talking about incorporating this in the local development plan. You can make a recommendation to Welsh Government to change the guidance on local development plans that would tell local councils that as they develop them, they should actually have a register of brownfield sites included in that, and that would then give you the systematic approach which you're looking for in your report. Would that not be something which is in the remit of Audit Wales?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations we did set for Welsh Government was to revisit looking at the potential sites and actually working with councils to list those identified sites. And also, we thought Welsh Government should do more to look at that kind of national picture of the brownfield sites that are out there, which we don't think is currently out there. So we have recommended they look at that, and also kind of revisiting how they monitor progress against those sites as well. So I think that was about as far as we could go in that sense. Yeah, so I think yeah, that's those two recommendations that we've made for Welsh Government, but I take your point on board.
Yeah, because the local development plan seems to me the natural way to do this, because that is about land use, and so it just seems that should be more focused on that rather than just a general recommendation.
I think part of that, sorry, just to come back on that, is obviously, planning legislation is very, very kind of precise legislation that would enable that to happen. And I think we wouldn't kind of be wishing to sort of influence legislation in that respect.
It wouldn't be legislation; it'd be statutory guidance. So that's something which the Welsh Government could do, and but anyway.
Yeah, we'll certainly take that on board to feed in for future work. Thank you.
Councillor Dye Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question to Matthew is on the development of the brownfield sites, where it says that obviously private developments have got less incentives to build less profitable homes, and it's also indicating there as well that let me just bring it up there 1 second, is that the shortage 2.15 shortages of skilled construction workers can potentially prevent the delivery of large-scale projects with an aging workforce. They're going to go down, right? So now, obviously, have you considered putting to Welsh Government that they come up with they maybe Build in Wales or a Crew Cymru, so that they got their own company to build the houses and also employ more youngsters and bring them through in the trade at the same time, because obviously less profitable houses to councils would be not for sale and to house people. So that would be a sort of opportunity there. Any considerations on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's so it wouldn't be for us to sort of influence policy in that respect. Whilst we've commented on it in the report, I mean, it's not the sole focus of the report, but I totally take that is an issue. So again, like, we wouldn't be wishing to influence policy in that respect. So, but yeah, I totally take it that it was a something that came up as a result of the report. What we do generally with studies is where we do find common issues like this, such as the shortage of workers, that will be fed into kind of future work we do as well. So that might not have been the focus for this review, hence like no specific recommendations from it. But yeah, that would be something we'd feed into other views. But we do have to be careful not to influence Welsh Government policy on this. Our role is really to look at how it's working within current legislation and actually whether they are delivering on current policy.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Tom?
Thank you, Chair, and Bore da all. My report then is set out from pages 23 onwards in the agenda pack, and really it highlights those three recommendations that are pertaining to councils, and recommendations in respect of how councils might react to the analysis in the report. And you'll see in section 3 there just a summarised position of the way in which we as a council, including as a planning authority, have been responding to this issue in any event, but will continue to do so. And what I do want to highlight in particular is really two important themes that Matthew would emphasise there, really in terms of a systematic nature of work needed in this area, and also in relation to councils being more the ability to be more interventionist, proactive, and even ambition was mentioned there earlier. Now, certainly, I have no doubt there's going to be a varying picture across Wales in terms of how individual councils are engaging with this. But certainly from a Swansea point of view, dealing with the latter theme first, in terms of ambition and interventionism, and taking that sort of proactive approach to delivering regeneration of brownfield sites. We've been a leader in that in Swansea, and there is quite a programme of major brownfield sites that have been regenerated and are continuing to be so through our work on a cross-departmental basis, very much a corporate One Swansea basis. Then, if I can put it in those terms, so the point I'm making there really is that we are very much and have been very much attuned to the need for exactly this kind of the opportunities that present themselves in terms of us as a council being very active in rather than reactive in this area. So whilst the report doesn't identify all the example and all the response to the audit report doesn't identify all those examples of it, they are there to be seen, and what it does do in terms of the response to the report, it sets out how every year then, as part of our service plan review, then we are identifying those priority projects and those regeneration schemes, and including those on brownfield sites that where major efforts are going to be focused on delivering development and bringing forward those sites. So that's a sort of mechanism for how we identify that. Those sort of ambitions corporately. And then just to pick up on the other element then, in terms of taking a systematic approach, I would very much agree with what was raised and what was highlighted by Councillor Black there, in terms of LDPs being very much an established statutory tool for taking exactly that kind of systematic approach, and needing to be based on robust and up-to-date evidence. So there will be a focus on that going forward, including things like a in-settlement review of all available land, which invariably is brownfield, but some of that comes out of the analysis as to whether it's classed as brownfield or not, or whether it's been regenerated and part of our green infrastructure network. But all of that is part of that sort of analysis. So development plans are then founded on what is considered to be developable land, or forming part of in-settlement land banks. And then, of course, we have a lot of work that goes into specific allocations then, and there's an element of the whole plan making process, as I'm sure many will know, that is about going to that whole nother level of detail in terms of potentially sort of concept planning for regeneration sites, identifying all the constraints to development, going through some of the financial analysis and so on and so forth, so, such that we have confidence then as a council that we are able to allocate sites for development and identify those as being deliverable within a set plan period. So I think that's the essence really of the report and the response in terms of how we are focused as a council on responding to these to this challenge, and how we have a systematic approach and very much an interventionist approach in that regard.
Thank you very much, Tom. I got Councillor Peter Black first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I got a number of questions. First of all, in terms of the identifying the brownfield sites, would you anticipate that most of them are in private ownership? And if so, what would be the process then of bringing them back into use? I mean, the Wales Audit Report highlights a number of obstacles. I mean, not least land ownership, of course, but contamination, the introduction of services, etc., all of which could mitigate against them being taken on by a developer, because of the additional costs in terms of developing brownfield as compared to a greenfield site. And of course, it may well be that the return in building on those sites may not be as great either. Just interested in that approach.
Yeah, really important that in terms of the first aspect, interestingly, it's quite a mixed picture in Swansea in terms of us as being we are a landowner, certainly more so than other councils, particularly in the urban area. So we will have those site regeneration sites in public ownership, and we are continuing to work to take those forwards as a public body, but often with private sector partners to do that. But as you say, there will be private sector controlled areas of land that might be well be in sort of strategically important locations within the urban area, and but I focus particularly on those that are in need of that sort of regeneration project to not only deliver the type of development that we want, but because that site is in some way detracting from the whether it be the main city centre or any of our sort of urban locations really. Our process that we'll go through in terms of identifying the specifics of that site and the constraints to it, again, is wrapped up within what we would normally do as part of the plan making process. So they would be subject to that kind of level of analysis that identifies some of those constraints that you identified there, and we would need to consider those in a wider context of what is deliverable and viable, having regard to the nature of the use that would be, for example, be expected to come forward on it. And then there is an additional level of analysis that considers, well, what does it mean in terms of the cost to bring forward that site? What does it mean, for example, in terms of wider social benefits and planning obligations that would be able to be delivered as a result? We do need to consider if development value is, or if the development values are such that the ability for planning obligations to be delivered are wiped, then that is a serious consideration as to whether that is considered a sustainable development in those terms, because a development should be meeting its wider requirements in terms of any identified impacts on the wider community. However, we need to and this always gets to the heart of what the planning process is all about in terms of balancing these sort of competing priorities and issues. We would need to balance that against the fact, how much of how important is that site to come forward for regeneration because of, going back to what I mentioned, for example, it may be a detract from the wider built natural environment, and there is an overriding need to see development come forward. And will there be sites where that sort of trumps the fact that it wouldn't be able to deliver planning obligations that would normally be expected? We have to be very sort of open, transparent on that, and not shy away from difficult decisions to be made. So often it comes down to the individuals of the site in question.
Okay, I've got two more questions. So presumably when you say land is white, you're talking about land which has not been designated in the LDP for any particular purpose. And presumably also you won't be relying entirely on candidate sites in terms of the privately owned sites in terms of bringing those forward in terms of the LDP. You will be looking more widely than that. So can I ask, have you thought in terms of identifying these sites, of actually involving local councillors to specify sites within their wards which are brownfield and might well be included in this review?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. It would be wider than just inviting those that have been submitted as, or just considering those have been considered as candidate sites. There is a much more proactive approach that goes into this, and we are looking at reviewing the land across the urban area. What do we consider to be key sites where development of some sort is considered necessary to take place, and where necessary we find out the ownership of those, and we instigate those kind of discussions then. Similarly, the answer to the question in terms of the involvement of local councillors, again, yes, councillors are as encouraged to be part of the LDP process throughout its formation at every single stage. And the need for brownfield regeneration is already being identified as a key issue, and as part of the plan making process, and that sort of ongoing engagement will undoubtedly happen.
Okay, I was thinking a bit more proactive than councillors being aware, but because obviously if you're going to put a list of sites together, then you may want to actually go to councillors and say, we're doing this list, can you help in this? But okay, my final question, in terms of the obstacles of bringing back regenerating brownfield sites, there are costs involved, and those costs can deter developers from taking on those things. So what sort of grants are available, either from the council or from the Welsh Government, which will actually assist to bringing these brownfield sites back into use?
Yeah, so just in relation to that, I'd highlight again the sort of different picture across Wales in terms of responding to this Audit Wales report. But for us in Swansea, again, systematically and structurally, we are set up to maximise what we do in terms of on interventions basis, and access to funding is a major part of that. We're all part of one service in terms of planning, regeneration, economic development, funding. This is all the business of the service. So in terms of what grants are available, they do range, whether they're sort of transforming towns through Welsh Government and so on, or whether that there continue to be some UK government avenues which are no doubt going to continue into the next sort of iteration of the next few years. But certainly with transforming towns, those grants are tied to the production of placemaking plans, something which is highlighted in the Audit Wales report in terms of some of those best practice or certain examples that are highlighted. Where a placemaking plan is produced, and again, those are being produced for Swansea. It forms the basis of a funding bid then to Welsh Government. So often it's to do with identifying how premises are being brought back into beneficial use then, or it's demonstrating wider community benefit that is being achieved through these regeneration projects. So the funding, wherever there is funding available, it's the plan making process, including the complementary placemaking plans then that should identify that.
Thank you, Tom. Next question is Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Problem switching on my microphone. Yes, thank you for the information provided so far. Listening to it, it's all good in theory, but when it comes to actual practice, the single most important factor for a developer, a private developer, is to make money. And therefore, they're going to want to develop the easiest sites, which are not usually brownfield sites. Now, in my ward, and I'm sorry to be parochial, 3 M's, massive industrial site. Will that be used for housing? No, because I suspect the cost of using even parts of it would be enormous in terms of dealing with potential contamination. Consequently, my fear for the future is that, yes, we can all see the point of developing brownfield sites, but in reality, and what has happened in the LDP is that essentially the large strategic sites are on greenfield sites. And in my ward in particular, 850 houses to be built on what part of is grade A agricultural land, classed as the best and most versatile in Wales, and should be preserved for posterity. Sorry, Chair, voice problems. And also partly in a green wedge. Now, this is going to have a massive environmental impact, but that is the reality of where we are. That's just one site. You go down to the next ward, 750 houses, green site. I've got another site, 166 houses, greenfield site. This is the problem. And if we are going to continue to have to develop such large numbers of housing, I just can't see it happening on brownfield sites. Hopefully, and from the information available, housing numbers now are not as desperate, but the future up to the next part of the LDP, we shall see what comes forward. But I'm sorry, cynic that I can fully concur and agree that we need to develop brownfield sites. In reality, I just can't see it happening if there's an easier and more readily available greenfield site available. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Tom, do you want to answer?
Yeah, I think the councillor raises a really important point, and it's around that issue of realism, and it does get back to the quality of the analysis and the evidence that goes into these sites. A notional list or land bank of brownfield sites given over to identify a need for commercial, residential, other sort of mixed use development is not good enough. It has to be, as I say, evidenced by what is the actual nature of the need. For example, when it comes to residential, providing for a range and type of homes over the next, a plan will typically be over 10 to 15 years, and we would need to demonstrate that family housing across the board is able to be delivered entirely on brownfield sites and within city centre and town centre areas. Now, no plan has ever successfully identified that, and there's a reason for that, because as soon as it's subjected to detailed analysis, it's shown how that is does not reflect the way in which we should be planning for a 10 to 15 year period. So invariably there is the need for greenfield sites to be identified. But I mean, my reading of the report is not necessarily that Audit Wales is saying that there shouldn't be identification of greenfield sites. It's about maximising the use of brownfield land where economic circumstances allow for that to occur, and just to maintain, ensuring that the councils and all partners maintain a focus on achieving that which is already a national policy goal for, wherever possible, maximising the use of brownfield land.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are there any other members who wish to speak, ask questions? Well, Matthew, can I say on behalf of the Swansea Council that we've had a really good record of regeneration of brownfield sites. If you only look at the Swansea Valley and the destruction and the pollution and what have you that we had in the Swansea Valley, and the successful building, whether people think it's a success in many terms, but the success of the enterprise zone and has been really excellent, and there are now houses being built on the periphery of that. So I think in many cases we can hold our head up high and say we've done a really good job in Swansea on our brownfield sites. Some of the brownfield sites have been very expensive to do. We have Penderyn, who have gone into the Landor site, which is probably the ultimate brownfield site in Swansea. And we've also done the Palace Theatre, the Albert Hall. They have been all given grant, etc., by Welsh Government or by the UK Government or by the Swansea City Council. So I think we've done a really good job right across the board in bringing back into use brownfield sites. I think in your report, I think one of the things that we need to seriously consider in the future is how we actually acquire these sites, and if we do acquire these sites, how the funding of those sites is going to be calculated, because we know that if you take on some brownfield sites, an example is the Copper Quarter up on the riverside, and when the company started building that and found the archaeology remains that were there, the cost of that development skyrocketed, and as such, that's why developers are a bit concerned about it. So I think one of the things I would have liked to seen in the audit report was this anticipation of what could happen if there is a discovery of certain archaeology that needs to be protected for the sake of Wales, and how we would mitigate that. So I think those are the issues that I think came out of this report. I know other people have had other comments, and especially about the building of new houses on greenfield sites around Swansea, which it does lend itself to the fact that we are losing a lot of agricultural land. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Matthew. I hope you've taken on board the very good comments that have been made by our members. And thank you, Tom, very much as well for your contribution as well. Thank you both. Do you wish to answer anything else? No.
Just from my point of view, Chair, just completely accept it's quite a challenging report, but it's really good just to see the discussion today and the challenge back to us. So we absolutely take that on board. It's always designed to be quite a difficult report. So just to get public bodies talking about quite a complex issue, but it's good to see everyone engaged. So just thank you once again to members, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you.
Thanks,
thank you. The next item on the agenda is Audit Wales report again. Use of Performance Information Service, user prospect and outcome. Rachel Harris from Audit Wales.
Hello.
Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Councillor. I'll get straight into it, if that's all right with you. The report in front of you is a piece of work that we've done at all 22 councils, And we do intend to publish a national summary report next month, I believe in July. But the report that is part of your papers today is the report that is specifically about Swansea. It's been finalised and agreed with the council. We've also asked the council to complete an organisational response form, which sets out the council's response to our recommendations, which I believe is on page 77 in your papers. So we are satisfied that our findings and recommendations have been properly considered in the preparation of that response. We note that some of those actions should now be complete, and members, I'm sure, will want to cover that in any subsequent discussions with officers, but I am jumping ahead a little bit. Before I go into the findings of the report, I think it's probably useful just to briefly touch on the scope of the work, because it is quite a specific scope. It is about the performance information that the council uses to help it understand the views of service users and the outcomes of the council's activities. It covers a specific point in time. And obviously, in terms of why we did that piece of work, you'll be well aware, members, the key role of councils is to provide services. So having performance information which helps senior leaders understand the perspective of service users and the outcomes is obviously very important, to help the council understand if what it's doing is helping it to achieve the objectives that it sets itself. But coming back to that quite specific scope, this report isn't. It isn't a review of consultation and engagement activity, nor is it a review of the council's performance arrangements or performance management arrangements more broadly. It isn't a review of the quality of the performance data. It is specifically about how that information is used to tell you about how effective, essentially, your activities being. So in terms of the findings of the report, they are set out in your papers, which obviously you'll have familiarised yourself with. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, members. I'm in your hands, really. So I can take you through those findings. We can go straight to the discussion. It's up to you.
I think going straight to discussion would probably be the best. Having gone through the paperwork, I think it is quite complex and quite specific about certain items. And I think it would be if we could have an input from Richard first and then open it up to all members. Is that all right, Richard?
That's fine with me. Yeah.
Okay, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Can I just start by saying that that we welcome the report, and it certainly caused us to reflect on the information that is contained within our reports. I think it's also fair to say, as Rachel alluded to, that this is an exercise that's being conducted across Wales. And I understand that most councils in Wales who had this report had similar findings. So this is not something which is just restricted to Swansea. But we have responded to the recommendations. So we've done a number of things. We undertook a resident survey last year, and we sought the public's views on council services and experiences as part of that review. And the results were reviewed at our corporate management team and also at the wider leadership team as well. And we're now going to participate in a WLGA organised national resident survey from this year, which will be very useful because a lot of local authorities in Wales will participate in that. So what that will allow us to do is it will allow us to undertake some benchmarking with other Welsh local authorities. What we've also done is enhanced our performance monitoring reports by including more qualitative information to supplement the quantitative measures that we have within our report. So now we include success measures as well as reviews against the steps within the corporate plan, and that allows us to become more outcome orientated and more focused on the citizens' experience. So that report, I think, now provides a more holistic view of performance, and the members here have obviously seen the last couple of quarters of that report. And at the moment, we are as well reviewing that information as part of our service planning process as well. So that's an ongoing process through 2020 to 2024, 2025, and also beyond that as well. So that's a summary of what we've done, Chair, to address the recommendations. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from any members? Anyone online? No? The one question I have, having gone through the report, is that it is very specific about the use of performance data and how that performance data is then disseminated throughout the council. The one thing you keep on saying about performance information provided senior leaders, that press for service users is limited. You don't actually say how that is limited in many ways. You just quite it's just difficult to see how you can fully understand the perspective of service users in managing performance. So I think it is very broad. It doesn't give many individual specific outlines to what is wrong with it. The one thing I would say is that a lot of performance data to the average member of the public is gobbledygook. You know, they just don't understand it all. And the other thing is the way a lot of performance data has been changed over the last few years are not relevant to each individual year. And that's the only thing I think that I find, that having gone through the report. And it would be interesting to see Richard's comments and then you, Rachel, on it.
Would you like my comments first, Chair?
Yes, please, Richard.
Yeah, I think this is why we've broadened the information that we now include in our performance reports. You know, traditionally we have the quantitative measures, but now we've supplemented that with success measures and with reviews against the steps within the corporate plan. I think what that allows us to do, it allows us to go beyond the figures and beyond the numbers and add a little bit more what's the right way to say it? A little bit more moving away from the technical side of things so that it is more understandable to the general public, and it does allow us to become a little bit more focused on outcomes and also become more citizen focused as well. So I think including that broader qualitative information has enhanced the report. So I think what this report did is it did allow us to reflect on that and to think of different ways in which we could make it more outcome and citizen focused and more understandable to the general public as well. And I think overall, the introduction of that more qualitative information has enhanced the report, and it does now, I think, provide a more balanced view of performance.
Thank you, Richard. Rachel?
Thank you. So if I've understood you correctly, I'm happy to expand on why we've described it as limited. Is that what you wanted me to do?
Yes, please.
Yep.
And it's just there is very little comment about the fact that scrutiny has this performance data every quarter, and how we disseminate that. Okay.
So what I would also say is that this is quite a succinct report, and there was obviously a lot of work, a lot of evidence that went into come into those conclusions, and we haven't sort of rehashed all of that or all of that evidence. We haven't shown all our workings out, if you like, in the report. But what we did see a great deal of performance information, and when in looking at that, we did see some examples of. We were looking specifically at those performance reports, really, that sort of performance information that makes its way into the public domain, be it through scrutiny or cabinet reports. That was a key focus for us. So in looking at that information, we did see some examples where that information told the people reading the report something about the service user perspective. And we did also see some examples of where that information told you something about the outcomes, or if you like, the impact of that activity. However, it wasn't for example, there was a lot of examples in, for example, social services, but very few examples then in other areas of the council. So whilst we did see some examples, it wasn't the case across all services, and not all of the information that was being collected was necessarily making its way to senior leaders. And so that's why we've described that as limited. That's why we've chosen that particular word. I hope that's helpful. And sorry, forgive me, Councillor, what was the second part of the question?
No, I think it's about, I think you've answered the question in total. What I was trying to establish was that, you know, oh, sorry, the second part, that the goalposts seem to alter year after year. I think it's the consistency that we can measure one year against another year is what we're actually looking for. I think Richard's element about actually reforming it and making it more readable is and for the general public is as the right way to go. But I think also we need to have an established set of performance data for a number of years so we can measure it and not keep on changing it.
Okay. I think that's we are sort of straying somewhat into the all performance management arrangements generally, which weren't the focus of this particular piece of work. But yeah, certainly we would have no argument with what you're suggesting there, that consistency of information over a number of years is very useful to have.
And the only other thing is how much information was passed on to the scrutiny board. There was very little in your report about that as well. But I can assure you that we do have the quarterly reports, and they are quite substantial as well. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
There doesn't seem to be any more questions. Can I thank you very much for coming in and present this report this morning? Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the draft work plan, and that's item 10 on the agenda. Are there any comments or questions about that? Obviously, we've got the we have on the 18th of June the annual conference on performance items. So if many people can make that, then there may be other issues that will be coming onto this agenda as well. On the final item on the agenda, which is item 11, are the letters. Are there any questions or comments on any of them? If not, thank you all very much for your attendance this morning, and I hope the weather improves for everybody. Thank you. So do I. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.